shape.
Watch it, Dave. They'll think you're mad. Hey, welcome to
I
Talking
think
Niagara.
I think they might have already thought that.
Yeah, welcome everybody to Talking Niagara this morning. So I've got a question for you before we start. So it's a practical question. Should medical offices be open on Saturdays? I'm not talking about every single Saturday, but for example, if you need to go to your doctor's, would it be nice to be able to have a Saturday appointment, especially if you've got a very busy week schedule? And should not just your family doctor, but your other doctors like eye clinics and hearing, many shops are actually, many hearing clinics are open on Saturdays. I'm not talking about every Saturday, let's say once a month or something like that.
All right, can they shut down a steel mill for the weekend? You know why they don't shut down a steel mill for a weekend? Because it's dumb. It's a continuous process. And guess what? That's what people are too. They don't only get hurt or get sick Monday to Friday. They also get sick on the Saturday and Sunday. And just about anyone, like when I had my broken hip and didn't know it, there was metaphysical Mike. Hi, Mike. When I had my busted hip back in 2019 and didn't know it, I sat in that emergency for 8 hours before I got anybody to look at me. 8 hours. And then and that's partly because it was a weekend. And they were reduced in staff. They didn't have enough doctors. As a matter of fact, the doctor that did my operation was a guest surgeon. So get this, like we don't get hurt on Monday to Friday and just wait till Saturday and Sunday's over before we start getting hurt again.
It's not just that. It occurs to me that, hey, you might have a medical condition that you want to go speak to your doctor on, but you've got busy week. You work Monday to Friday, and of course the doctor's hours are exactly the same as your work hours. So by the time you get home in an evening, the doctor's not there. Some doctors do have late surgeries once a week or something. And I'm not talking about every Saturday. Hey, I'm a great believer in having Saturdays and Sundays off and having a work-life balance. But I do believe that we probably ought to have doctors open, let's say once a month or once every 2 months.
Oh, I think doctors should set up their practices to be 7 days a week, and with agreement with other doctors. Maybe you do Monday to Friday, and I'll do Friday to Tuesday, and that sort of thing. You don't shut down the hospital, do you? You don't shut the hospital.
Yeah, but what you just basically said to me is that they do shut down the hospital. They have a Monday to Friday crew, and they have a Saturday crew. And probably what happens with the hospital is the Friday to Monday crew is actually the crew that is there for injuries due to bar fights and drunkenness.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as say that. I would say that the nurses and all that are doing their regular scheduled thing, and they have doctors that are scheduled. But what happens on the weekends, you do get shortages because doctors are just like everybody else. They want to go on holidays or be with their family on the long weekends or the weekends where their kids and family are together, and that's because we have this silly 5-day-a-week attitude. I think the whole thing should be turned around, and we should have 7-day-a-week weeks. And you do your if you're a millwright like me, and you get on a shift, maybe your shift would be Wednesday to Sunday, and maybe the other guys would be a different one.
Yeah.
Like I said, I compared it to a steel mill. Why don't you shut down the steel mill on the weekend? Because you've got molten steel going, and you have to keep that operation going.
I knew somebody who worked at Heathrow Airport. She worked she had a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. shift, and there was somebody who would have had a 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift, 7 days a week. and well, not 7 days a week, 4 days a week. So she had 4 days on and 4 days off. Well, why can't we all have 4 days on, 4 days off?
Well, look, you could do if you want to do a 4 hour. One of the things you can do is do a 10-hour day. So you do Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and somebody does Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In that kind of thing. Or 1 week you do a 30, and the next week the other person does a 40, and then you can have a 3 or a 4 day long weekend. There's many ways to address this, and it's not easy to do that. It's just not exactly the easiest thing to do. But with healthcare and stuff like that, the idea that we have that you have to go to emergency on any day, and you're lucky to get in to see your doctor anyway, But there are people right now who do not have doctors, and I think I'm going to be one of them in a few years because my doctor's going to retire. So there's a lot of people that don't have family doctors, and they have to depend on the clinics. And so if you get sick, you got to go to the clinic. You can't go talk to your doctor like you normally would. But like if I would, I could just phone my doctor and say, "Hey, look, this is what's happening. Should I come and see you or not?" He'll say yeah or no.
Should you think, therefore, in that particular case, and hey, I'm not saying that everybody should abandon their doctor, but should you think, given that you're kind of feeling that, hey, your doctor's going to retire in, say, 5 years' time, should you be thinking that in 3 or 4 years' time, you should be finding a new doctor, one that's younger than you?
That is a lot easier said than done.
Maybe.
Yeah, there isn't right now. It's the whole idea, if you've been following the news at all, is that there are hundreds of, tens of thousands of people don't have a family doctor in Canada right now. And that's because we have a massive shortage. Yeah, and we have 500,000 new people coming into the country every year. And of course, most of them come to Ontario. Where are your family doctors going to spread out? You can't spread that much out. So it's going to be very, very difficult to get a family doctor. At one time, when the population was growing at normal levels, you could get a family doctor, or at least get a waiting list on and be there. Mike Cushman says, we need free education with the stipulation you save 10 years here. You serve 10 years here. Well, there's a good idea, Mike. It's a very, very good idea. I think there's a lot of very talented people that could become doctors in Ontario. It is cost prohibitive. Number one, it is too tightly zoned. They only allow so many people to become doctors. And so what do we end up doing is we end up going offshore to get doctors from some other place to come here. Laurie Parliament says, you can't get a new doctor if you already have one. You can only switch if you move to a further location. Yeah, that's true. I'm pretty happy with the doctor I have, but I just my idea is that I might not get another one because anyone who hasn't had a doctor gets in a kind of a line, I guess. And in the meantime, they have to go to the clinic to get anything done. And of course, I'm the type of guy that only gets sick on weekends. So I know the clinic thing. I know the emergency thing. It's no good,
Yeah.
The medical field has to be open 7 days a week because we are people, and a virus as COVID didn't take weekends off. Meningitis doesn't take weekends off. Car accidents don't take weekends off. So we need a medical, and the type you're talking about is every day go see your GP.
Well, I'm not just talking about GPs. I'm talking about those kind of physiotherapy places that need to be open all the time, or all manners of treatments, eye doctors, ear doctors that need to have, that those clinics need to be open on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on this one. I think all medical facilities should be open that way. And I think the family doctor should arrange it so they are what they do now. Oh, good morning, Karen. I saw you on Sunday night when I was at the studio on McLeod Road. Well, I'm getting ready. Your face is on the on the screen, chatting away. Couldn't hear what you were saying, but you look good saying it.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. So that's actually, I think that's the part of the thing, and I also think that we need to be a 7-day-a-week society anyway. And I'm not proposing that individuals are forced to work 7 days a week, but we live in a 7-day-a-week kind of environment.
Yes, and unfortunately, we've set ourselves up. Government, legal, everything is all set up for a 5-day week.
Well,
If you go back far enough, it was a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
That was how just about everything worked, from schools to banks to anything. Right now, I don't think our society can handle that old-fashioned way. Karen Fraser also says, "Thank you. Seniors Month is almost here." Well, I got to skedaddle because somebody may be able to identify me as a senior. I don't want that to happen.
Okay, so with such a shortage of doctors, Mike says it's impossible. And yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying. But you see, that's actually about modernizing our healthcare system. And I'm just asking the question because I think the discussion needs to be out there.
Yeah, I think there was a time when you couldn't go to a grocery store on a Sunday. You couldn't even go to a convenience store on a Sunday because our attitudes of when things should be open or closed were a cultural thing. Yeah. I think nowadays everything should be open 7 days a week, and the idea of the weekend is going to go by the wayside. And it is a long tradition of having the weekend, the end of the week. But if you worked in places like I did, where the weekend really didn't make a whole lot of difference, depending on what you were working on, you
could be on the weekend shift. Yeah, absolutely. Because as you say, things like steel mills, they're working 24/7. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If they shut them down, if you're shutting a mill down, it's because you're fixing something, and it's a 3-day shutdown and a 5-day startup type thing, isn't it?
Well, yeah. For instance, a blast furnace, you can't hold it back for very long at all. You've got molten steel in there, and when that molten steel is ready to pour, it's ready to pour. The only thing you can do, if you got a shutdown, you could slow down the process a little bit and gain a day or two to do some maintenance. But the fact is that you're going to be pouring steel, and I think Karen Fraser says we are a 24-hour world. Yes, we are. 24 hours. Even on leap years.
Well, and 24, and actually that the steel mill is the perfect example of this. They basically will set up those blast furnaces so that you're pouring at a regular interval anyway.
Yeah, and that depends. That always depends, and it's usually a fairly regular interval, and you can adjust that somewhat, a little bit here and a little bit there. But let's put it this way: you're going to have to. When you're doing a blast furnace, you're charging it with coke, lime, and iron ore, basically, and it goes into the top of that blast furnace, and you jet in oxygen and stuff like that, so you get molten steel, and that process cannot be stopped. It's a huge process.
Yeah,
and it has to go on 24 hours unless you're going to do a furnace rebuild or something like that. Then the whole place has to shut down. But typically speaking, week by week by week, you can't shut it down. And I think people are like a steel mill. I mean, it's kind of a dumb comparison, basically. But we don't shut down. We're 24 hours 7, just like it's a 24-hour world. Karen said people are 24 hours too, 24 hours 7 day a week.
Yeah, and we live in a 22-hour city, basically. We're not quite a 24-hour city. We live in a 22-hour city. Right? We have kind of typically a two-hour night off. And essentially when I was driving taxis around here, it was pretty obvious that there's still as much going on at night as there is during the day.
Yeah, I don't know, but anyway, the problem I see here, though, basically, is just the fact that we kind of, our whole system is based on a weekend based system. I really don't think overall that's really healthy. I think a lot of the major deals go on during the weekend behind closed doors for stock market and stuff like that. And I think that's a problem because you've got your stock market open 5 days a week for the regular hoi polloi, but there are deals and stuff being waged during the weekend that you can't see or know about. If it was a 7-day-a-week thing, a lot of that may have been able to couldn't be able to be hidden. But on the other hand, the 5-day-a-week thing has saved the stock market from plunging into the abyss a few times because the stock market shuts down on Friday afternoon, and then
and
readjustments.
And sometimes you need that readjustment. For example, they always say that a lot of the time it's said that when you've got a new prime minister coming in, that. And it will be the case, for example, if Pierre Poilievre comes in, there'll be a bit of jitters on the stock market for a few days, right?
Yeah.
Before it will right itself, because they're not used to change. They want stability. So because with the evil that is Justin Trudeau, for example, they know what he does. They know how he acts. They know what what the position is, and they know that, hey, if a certain part of the stock market does a certain thing, the government's going to react in a certain way because they have plotted it out. It doesn't matter the shade of the incoming government, whether they're pro-business or pro-stock exchange or not, there's always a bit of doubt when there's an incoming government coming in.
Well, yeah, I think the weekend thing it'd be very good for politicians like Justin, because on the weekend he can do blackface and nobody can know it, right? So he can get his in his desire to do to makeup and stuff like that on the weekend, and he needs a break. Anyway, Mike Cushman says because of high hydro rates, factories have been operating on midnights and off-peak hours. So quite right.
Yeah.
Quite right. Now, and our high hydro rates, and this kills me because the average person is never aware of this. When I was on part of our committee, our union committee investigating power outages, and we were talking about the coal plant, we came to the conclusion that the Big Nanaco coal plant should not have been shut down any earlier than 2015 or 2016. They closed it in 2011, I think. And that was because it would chase too much industry away before we could have electricity at the same price. Well, what happened was our electrical price went up and it chased all kinds of industries out of Ontario. Anywhere from like 100,000 good jobs just in 1 year. I think it was 2003. And that was all because the power price is going up. Toyota took out the Corolla plant here right after Wind declared that they were going to close down the coal plants and set up wind and solar, which you can't make up that kind of power with wind and solar. So Toyota says, okay, our Corolla plant's going to be picked up out of Ontario and put into Mexico because they all look the other way when it comes time to make power in Mexico.
All right. Anyway, let's move on. Okay. So Prime Minister Justin Trudeau now says military operations in Rafah must stop after the ICJ has ordered Israel to halt its offensive in the southern Gaza city.
Where were you, Prime Minister? Where were you? Where have you been? You're just aping and saying everything else that everyone else has said. How come? Where were you all this time? Little bit of feeble comment here and there, and I'll say the same thing about Jagmeet Singh and Pierre Poilievre too. There's been an atrocious massacre happening there. In this particular case, Israel had been warned by the ICJ, and remember that Trudeau had problems with the ICJ calling Israel a possible genocide operation going on. He didn't like that idea. Well, guess what? What are you going to say now, right? They said, be careful around Rafah. There's no other place for people to go. You know what? They think they saw two Hamas operatives there, and they didn't give a damn that there were all these people around. They didn't give a damn at all. They were going to get those two guys. We don't even know if they really got them. They say they got them. Who knows? So they hit a couple of terrorists. They didn't give a hoot. They were going to get those two guys if it cost them 1,000 lives. It didn't matter to them. What people don't understand, what guys like Trudeau and that doesn't understand, these guys are Zionists, like guys like Netanyahu. They want the Gaza Strip. They feel like God gave it to their people. And the same thing with the West Bank. They have no compunction about killing large amounts of people. They just got to be careful about it. And they're not even careful about it now. And all Biden says is, well, it was an accident and they're having an investigation. How many of these investigations there are? If you watch these press conferences in the U.S., we're investigating. Israel is investigating that incident. And the press people says, well, you're counting on Israel to come up with an impartial. You're getting the IDF to investigate the IDF, and you think you're going to get impartial? Oh yes, we do. They actually said that, and I think, God, I know. They're just lying because they know they can't be that naive.
Well, Israel is basically saying that Rafah is Hamas's last major stronghold, and that's why they're vowing to invade it.
Well, they pushed everybody into that corner. Of course, it's the last stronghold because that's everywhere, including the insurgents, the terrorists, if you like, who are being pushed into that corner. But what everybody talks about in the West is they talk about this thing beginning October 7th. It didn't. It happened before 1900. That's when it began. It happened when the Jewish terrorist groups blew up the King David Hotel, or they murdered British diplomats, or they murdered a Swedish diplomat who had a good program of dividing the land fairly. So they just murdered him. And unfortunately, what's happening now is Israel has no intent of having a two-state solution, none at all. And they have given money to Hamas. Now it's come back and bit them, but they gave money to Hamas and supported Hamas so that they will feud with the Palestinian Authority. And nobody talks about that in the U.S. Congress. Nobody talks about that in the press conference. In fact, the press know if they've ever bring that up, they'll never be asked their question again. And Hamas is partly a creation of Israel. And Netanyahu's on record about bragging about how he kept funding, make sure that Hamas was funding through Qatar. So the hypocrisy here is like gigantic. And we have to protect. And now our prime minister is saying, he's saying, oh, you know what, it's really bad. Our foreign affairs people, Jolly, says, oh, it's really bad. Well, guess what?
Yeah, and of course, then we get this situation whereby NDP foreign affairs critic Heather McPherson says Liberals' response on the conflict has been weak. But hey, NDP, where have you been for the last 6 months or more?
Yeah, where's your voice? Yeah, I'd like to hear that too.
I've not heard. I really haven't heard. Yeah, I haven't heard you say a damn thing on this for the last 6 months. Now you speak up because Justin Trudeau has decided to actually, well, grow part of a backbone on this issue.
And the only reason why he's doing it is because every other country's doing it. He's kind of taking his cues from everybody else. Oh, the Europeans didn't like it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I can say something now too, right? You know, the France is outraged. The European Union is really mad. Oh, as all those people said stuff. Okay, now I can too. Like really, he's a follower, not a leader.
South Africa. I have to applaud South Africa for taking this action, right? Because without what South Africa have done, we wouldn't be where we are today. We're in respect of the international courts of justice.
Yeah, the only country in the world. Well, Norway, Spain, and Ireland, they've have a backbone. They've accepted Palestinian statehood. That was a big step. South Africa, full well knowing of what happens in an apartheid state and the reaction. Remember, they had the ANC. Nelson Mandela was a terrorist. Nelson Mandela was associated with the ANC, the terrorist part of the ANC, because the reason why they went the way they did towards violence, because nothing else was working.
Yeah,
that's why Geronimo jumped out of his reservation, right, and started killing people, and reacting the way they did. That's what Ned Turner did, the slave guys. That's what they did in Haiti, right? Haiti is celebrated as the one country that threw out the shackles of slavery. And what did they do, though, when they did that revolution, right? They killed a lot of people. It's because when you are oppressed, you're going to explode like a spring. We have to relieve the tensions there. We have to take away the reason for terrorism. Like I said before many times on this show, that the Israeli state, part of what created the Israeli state were the terrorist groups, the Irgun, the Stern Gang, and the Haganah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know, man. They were. They of course, the most famous one is they blew up the King David Hotel and killed nearly 100 people, innocent people. They killed people. They rigged bodies up with explosives so that if a British soldier a British policeman came and saw his buddy being shot and then went to do something about it, it would explode on him. So you can see the same ideas. When you read, I got something here about how the strategies of the Jewish terrorist groups before 1948, they're very much like the strategies that are supposed for Hamas too. They're very similar. Get a large reaction with a huge amount of violence and see where it goes. And that's the kind of thing we have to see. We can, like normal people in this world doesn't have to put up with this.
What is the way that such groups have been operating for not just in the past century and not just over this issue, but it's been the way groups have been reacting for hundreds of years now?
Yeah. Okay, the numbers didn't tell the whole story. The insurgents confounded the British by conducting a two-front war, a tactical paramilitary battle for control, and the ability to run a strategic, political, and psychological battle for legitimacy. So these are the kind of things that the Jewish terrorist groups are going. I have this from a radio show that I did with Paul K. Lemire when the hotel in Jerusalem in July 1946 killed 92 people. Following that disaster, it was a grave embarrassment to the moderate Zionists. The Haganah effectively withdrew from the armed operation, unrestrained by the need for a united front. The Irgun and the Stern Gang rapidly escalated levels of violence, nearly fourfold in the second phase, carrying out 286 attacks over the next 12 months. Casualties exceeded 1,000 over the 2-year period. That's just
after the end. That's just after the end of World War II. Yes.
Yeah, well, they did this all during World War II too. They attacked
Oh,
the
I know
British,
they. Yeah, I
even though
know
the
they
British
did.
were fighting the
Yeah,
Germans.
and when you consider that was an area that wasn't actually officially part of the war.
There's a bunch of there's a bunch of different things here. While the insurgents relied on the tried and true terrorist tactics. Does that sound like Hamas or what? Does that sound this is the CERN gang, the Irgun. These are the Jewish terrorist groups that were working in the 40s. While the insurgents relied on tried and true terrorist tactics such as bombings, assassinations, and sabotage, they offset the British military advantages with tactical innovations of their own. Anyway, there's lots to be said, but it's the same idea.
Yeah.
And what I like to point out is terrorism was the thing that helped Israel be born. Without terrorism, it wouldn't have happened. And I think the lesson was not lost on the Palestinians, and they're using terrorism, but their terrorism won't work because they don't have an exhausted colonial power ready to leave like Britain was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Britain was only supposed to be, that was supposed to be one of the few areas of around that was relatively peaceful during the war. But of course, it was supposed to be like a backwater. If you were, if you were in the military, you were assigned to Palestine, you're probably going, oh no, I want to get out of there. I want to go to war. If you were a professional soldier, I want to go to where the war happens. And then, of course, there's terrorism there, back in that day.
Well,
which is a different kind of war entirely.
The Balfour Declaration in 1917 was an attempt by the British to help Jews create a state of their own. So what did the Jews do? They attacked the Brits. Not all of them. Of course, the terrorists did, because they weren't getting out fast enough. And the British were protecting the Arabs at the time. As soon as the British went, what did you have? They had the Nakba, where all these people all these Palestinians were forced to leave their land and be pushed to places like Jordan, Gaza, the West Bank, and now Israel wants the West Bank and Gaza too.
Okay. And Mike makes a point here. Well, what about places like USA, Tulsa Race Massacre, which was created by white supremacists who was in 1921. Yeah,
1921. That was a clear attempt to get rid of a prosperous part of Tulsa, which happened to be the black part. Now, don't get the idea the whole part was prosperous. A lot of it were very, very poor and full of slums, just like most other black areas in those times. But there was a very prosperous part of Tulsa, and of course the riots there. I don't know if it was white supremacists so much as it was just people who hated black people because they were grown up with that idea that the blacks should know their place and they should be over there, and that kind of thing. And if they're doing well, we'll take what they have. That's what they did to Jews for centuries upon centuries in Europe. As soon as they started doing well, they'd have a pogrom, rip into their neighborhoods and steal what they had.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And this has been it's been an ongoing problem. Okay. So let's move on to something more local. According to Doug Ford, people are excited they're going to enjoy the same choice and convenience as other Canadians and people across the world because of his announcement that booze is going to be sold at convenience stores and grocery stores. I do have a big question about this, is that, hey, you go into a convenience store like an Avondale or something like that, and, not to advertise any individual store, but how often is there only just one person working there, and they're on minimum wage? So do you think that is the right store to be selling booze? I don't think so.
Well, I discussed this with the beer store employee. I was in the beer store a few days ago, and I remember reading this article then, and I said to the guy, I said, he was a young guy, and I could see Yeah, this was his job, and if he lost this job, man, it'd be hurting him pretty bad. If you're young and you lose your job, it's hard to get another one. So I told him, I says, "Look, you guys worried about these new laws gonna hurt you?" And he says, "No. Apparently, they said they're not going to lose any employees at all." And he said that the beer sales that they'll lose over the counter will be offset by the amount of beer they can sell as a retailer. Remember, the brewers retail, or the beer store, supplies restaurants, parties.
Oh yeah, I know.
It makes most of its money on big transfers of beer to places that sell it. I don't like the idea of it being sold in a grocery store because, like you said, the people working there are making less money.
Well, it's
and I see the potential for the beer store losing jobs. I don't care what they say.
Well, right? It's not so much. It's not that because I care about the beer store. Generally speaking, I'm all approved that the beer store needs to lose its monopoly. I'm approved that the LCBO needs to lose its monopoly. That we need to have independent alcohol stores, but I think what we need to do is have specialist liquor stores, not have corner stores who pay minimum wage and don't train anybody how to do it, how to sell this kind of stuff, and you may even end up with a teenager selling alcohol. Well, that's illegal. So how does that help anybody? It doesn't help anybody. I think what we need to be going to is a model which has specialist off-license stores.
I love the way Ford starts off. He says,
not, I'm not saying basically what we need is something similar to LCBO and beer store, but owned by people like you and I.
I like the way Ford started off his comment. He says, he begins his speech by saying, people are excited. They're going to enjoy the same choice and convenience that other Canadians, other people across the world. Yes, it was way up there on my excitement meter. How about yours?
Yeah, but you see, remember, who's the guy who, as an election promise, said he was going to make Buck a beer?
Yeah, well, I didn't vote for him because I knew he was lying.
I've not seen the Buck a beer, Dougie. Let's have our Buck a beer, right?
Buck a beer. I gotta admit that was a cool thing to do because he knew even if he was able to deliver on that, it would be very short, and it would be something you wouldn't want to drink anyway.
Yeah, so that's actually the problem with it, is that I knew it would be some rotten beer that I'd be going, this is the Doug Ford beer. Yeah, you can keep it, Doug.
My problem with this is who's going to be able to attain more of the alcohol now? Younger, they got a pretty strict view of things in the LCBO and the beer store, like for somebody that's younger. When I was in there, the beer store that same day I was talking about, the person behind me was asked for ID right away. But in a convenience store and that, particularly if you have people who are working behind the counter, that English isn't their first language, maybe they can be flim-flammed by phony ID or something like this. Is it going to make it easier for younger people to get? Robert Topal says people are excited. Oh no, that's yours. Anyway,
Robert Topal just said good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Robert. So I don't know. It's something that's going to happen anyway. Let's put it that way. Sooner or later, and the conservatives are the ones that are going to do it. In a different world, back in the 60s or 70s, the conservatives were the ones who would be calling against this. They would be putting out, no, Sunday, you shouldn't be having it sold on Sundays. You shouldn't have it. That was the conservative time back then.
Yeah.
They were motivated by more culturally conservative attitudes. They're more churchgoers and stuff like that. And the conservatives back in those days didn't want stores open on Sundays, and they didn't want any beer or alcohol sold in stores at all. Now it's the conservatives that are bringing it in, which is a big difference. So the conservative attitude, the conservative church growing part of the conservatives have less power now. That's pretty obvious.
And if I was a convenience store owner for some convenience stores, there'd be some areas I'd be saying, well, actually, I don't want to be holding beer in my convenience store. Yes, I can make a lot of money out of it, but I'm also going to potentially increase the probability that I'm going to get my store is going to get robbed.
Possibly, yeah. Liquor stores were always those things that get knocked off in the States, and that kind of thing. I would say that that my concern is younger people getting more access to alcohol, that kind of thing in a corner store. But on the other hand, I can't see this as stopping because this has been the trend for a very long time. If you can go to Europe or you can go anywhere else, you can buy beer or liquor or anything. I mean, you can buy that in a gas station in some places in the States. Depending on the state, you might go through a dry county, but then you might go into another one where you can go to the corner store and get hard liquor and wine. The idea though of restricting hard liquor, I like that idea still.
Well, I have a not so fond memory of Germany. When I was living in Munich, on a Friday night, there'd be the guy would pull into the gas station, fill up his car, go into the store, and actually, take him like 5-10 minutes to actually pay for his gas, etc. Then he's pulling out crates of beer. I'm not talking about one, maybe two crates of beer. I'm talking about he's pulling out 10 or 15 crates of beer, like milk bottle sized crates of beer, that he's loading. He's then proceeding to load in his front seat, and then he opens the back door and he says, "Move over," to his wife, and then proceeds to load up the back seat.
Did he put a seatbelt on those crates?
Yes, he did.
Good man.
But and then as he drives away, there's the man in the front seat with one of these bench front seats, the American style bench front seats, and he's got a dog in the front seat right alongside the beer crates. Hey, I think that was, it was, unfortunately, I think that's gas stations are the worst place to sell booze.
Well, I don't know if we're going to be selling them here unless there's a convenience store at the gas station. So
yeah,
I don't know. There's nothing we can do about it. This is obviously the will of the people. Nobody is lining up and saying, no, we don't. We're going to fight Doug Ford on this. We're not, for the most part. My biggest worry, of course, is the people that are working in the beer store and the liquor store. Are they going to lose their jobs? Because those jobs are fairly well paying compared to, convenience store clerk.
I actually am favor of us creating independent liquor stores, so that we do have people who are knowledgeable about liquor selling liquor.
I don't know where that's going to go. I don't know about hard liquor, but for now we have to work on the softer liquors.
Oh, no, totally necessary. Well, hard liquor, as much as anything, hard liquor basically is the most expensive of the liquors anyway. But I think it's important that and another thing that's important about this is that if they are doing anything about the beer store, what they also have to deal with is actually the transportation monopoly. Right? People should be free to get the beer wherever the store owners should be free to get the beer wherever they can get the beer.
Yeah, well,
rather than through the beer store.
Well, normally they would go through the beer store because they wouldn't be one. Like if otherwise, what would happen is Karen Fraser says families who live with an alcoholic dread easier access to beer and alcohol. Yes,
I understand exactly that. Yes,
yes, indeed.
Yeah,
and I'm afraid our alcoholic rates are going to go up. I think that unfortunately our rising group of homeless people is going to go up, and the access to getting the alcohol. What are you going to do if you're an adult and it doesn't matter if you're stinky and just come off the street and you manage to scrounge a couple of bucks? You can go ahead and get yourself a can of beer or whatever you want. I think that's going to make it easier for them, of course, because convenience stores stay open 24 hours, some of them. Like for right now, for instance, a place like Zehrs can sell beer in Zehrs, but they can't sell it during after hours of liquor and beer stores. So the beer store closes at 9, so you can't buy beer at Zehrs after 9. Are they going to make that kind of restriction on alcohol, other alcohols too? Like if you go into the wine store, basically, or the convenience store? I don't think so. I think you'll be able to sell it 24 hours. And that's where Karen's is right.
And that's what Karen's point is. Yeah, absolutely. I understand it. All right. Moving on, here's one for you. NPR formally punished Uri Berliner, one of their editors, who published an article who argued a week ago that the network had lost America's trust and approaching news stories with a rigidly progressive mindset.
Yes, it's not the first time. Now this fellow, Uri Berliner, he works there at NPR, and he felt that NPR were becoming locked into a progressive groupthink, basically. He felt that the journalists were giving too many opinions and not enough journalism, and their opinions were lining up with the progressives more than anything. And NPR had this problem back in the 90s. Nobody remembers this because the Republicans were pushing to defund NPR because it was too one-sided, particularly politically. And when NPR actually did an investigation of itself, they found that was to be true, that they leaned more left than they did right, and they did not have a completely balanced view of things. And so this fella has pointed out, now he's set up the alarm bells, basically, and NPR is in denial of this, saying that he doesn't have enough, that he didn't set up his column and his criticism well enough, but and he got a 5-day suspension for it. He's a senior editor, by the way, of NPR. Now he got a 5-day suspension for this because he didn't go through proper channels. But what he sees there is what I think I saw in NPR too. NPR was one of my go-tos, and it still is. But there are elements of NPR that are very much progressive, unfortunately. I remember, I think it was Morning Edition, I was listening, and when Doug Ford first got elected, way back when his first term came through, Morning Edition reached out to somebody in Ontario to tell them what it was all about. And she railed about Doug Ford being nothing more than another Trump. And yet they left it there. They didn't ask for anyone else's opinions. They left it at that. Well, who is Doug Ford? Well, he's a Trump following baddie, blah, blah, blah. And he went on and on about his fascist qualities, but they didn't ask for another opinion. They left it with that. And the morning edition host says, "Oh, there you have it. There, the shift towards the right," or something like that. They didn't have a balanced view of that at all, which bothered me. And I think NPR is losing that ability to have a balance, because obviously they hire young people coming out of journalism, and those people then go off and they usually carry progressive attitudes with them. And NPR is letting more and more of them do opinions instead of journalism. And in fact, that was a really good quote here that Berliner said. He said that if I could find it here, that they have really good journalists, and if they were let the journalists do the journalism and took away their opinion, it would be fine. And now they have a lady.
And that's actually something that is, something that I think the last probably 50 years of journalism has been moving towards journalists not reporting the stories that are seen on the streets, but giving their opinions about it. And hey, journalists, tell us what's going on. Don't give us your opinion. I don't want to know. I'll form my own opinion.
And here it says, Berliner says, "I love NPR and feel it's a national trust. We have great journalists here. If we shed their opinions and did great journalism they're capable of, this would be a much more interesting and fulfilling organization for our listeners." And I feel that too. I feel they have a lean towards a progressive attitude. Even sometimes it's veiled. And I don't think they could even help it. I think that's the way they see the world. And even and upsetting to me was the new CEO, Catherine Mayer, she's brand new, of NPR. She's had a history of being rather reactionary, left sort of reactionary. She's called Trump a bunch of different names. That's not real journalism, is it? She's got an opinion on Trump. She downplayed the riots of certain riots, probably so she downplayed those purposely. That's not good journalism. You're trying to make an effect. And I saw her on TV saying that she had trouble with the First Amendment because it was so wide open that it was hard to control where the news came from. Well, what she's talking about there, basically, or hinting at, is controlling the news. I mean, if the First Amendment is too hot for you, then what you do is you start controlling it.
Yeah. Honestly, some of those opinions I find, again, too much opinionated, and First Amendment is what it is, and it was deliberately written that way by the fathers of America. And actually, it has its equivalences around the world, and the right to free speech is something that we all is all important to everybody.
Balanced free speech. This is where I have the problem. I mean, it's easy to diss a company like Fox because they're just a joke. I mean, they'll add some real news to it once in a while, and they'll take their point of view. For instance, when I looked at the headlines the other day for this atrocity that happened in Rafah, where 45 innocents were burned and ripped to pieces on that bombing, the first thing that Fox did, two Hamas activists or two Hamas terrorists killed, and then underneath 45 other people too. So that was their take. Now, this guy has said these things, and he's being rebuked by the newsroom. Morning Edition host Michael Martin told me some colleagues at the network share Berliner's concerns that coverage is frequently presented through an ideological or idealistic prism that can alienate listeners. And I'm one of those that started to become alienated. Even if I agree with the opinions somebody's telling me on NPR, I don't like it. And I don't like what they leave out. I went to NPR because they were balanced. And sometimes I wonder if they're really balanced anymore. It's like the same problem I'm having with CBC. Well, they're not really that bad yet. CBC has long since had a very progressive, liberal sort of point of view, basically. And that's the same thing. That we complain a lot about American networks like Fox and stuff like that. But the ones that we've come to hope that were balanced, that were really objective, are the ones that are losing ground too. CBC is no longer objective. It's definitely in the liberal camp. That's who feeds them the most money. So I guess they're feeding the hands that feeds them. And NPR, they're going way progressive. I don't like that. I want a balanced approach. I think there should be. Al Jazeera had a pretty good idea. It never came to fruition, though. They were going to do a show called Conservative Talk, and it was just basically conservatives in the United States particularly, but conservatives all over the world putting out their point of view, so that you could actually go someplace and know that they were going to get a balanced opinion on conservative attitudes, because you don't always get it.
And I guess you could do the same. You could do the same on the same basis of liberal talk as well.
Yes, but they didn't think they needed that, because most of the news comes from journalists that have a liberal lean to them, and it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to get the conservative idea out there. I mean, the one that follows democracy. I mean, what we have going on now. I had a on-running commentary with somebody about conservatives. They hated conservatives. They felt they were evil and all this other Ontario conservatives because of the new highway, the 413. They were really bad, evil people. They shouldn't really, they did this, they did that. Well, I try to point out, well, all the other parties have done the similar things. And you immediately have a hate on for the conservatives. No, don't do that. Have a hate on for the policy or dislike the policy, but conservatives are just like every other person. They just have a different attitude on how the government.
Take that concept of Doug Ford being Donald Trump in Ontario. He's not anywhere near like that. We know that from the fact that he's actually quite a practical guy.
Yeah. So this show on NPR left it at that.
Yeah.
And that was one of the pieces of evidence I had. Doug Ford got elected, and the first thing they did, well, what's this guy in Ontario like? And they had some woman spokesman, and she dissed the guy, pretty much said he's Donald Trump of the North, and she went on to slur him a bunch of different ways. And NPR left at that. They didn't go and ask another opinion. They left it like that. So you definitely gave the impression to anyone who listened that this woman was an expert and she had him figured out as a terrible dude. But there was no alternate view.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately what NPR
the truth of the matter is, having several years of Doug Ford government, he's, do I support everything he's brought out? No. But there's a lot of practical stuff that Doug Ford has done that I think is very worthy of support.
Look, my point was that there's an ideological slant to the NPR now, which is problematic. There has been an ideological slant to the CBC for a long time now, which is a problem. Where does real objective journalism come from? There has to be it out there, and we're losing that, even from trusted organizations, what formerly trusted CBC, and what is still trusted, the NPR. And those are the things that I think are problematic. We don't get a balanced view of things. And when it comes to political parties, in that, like I am not the one that I hate the polarization that's going on now. I mean, I speak defending conservatives. I never voted conservative in my life, but because look, I've known friends of mine that have been conservative party members. They're not evil. They don't have horns.
No.
They're not picking people's pockets. They're not going to the hospital and pulling out the.
I thought that was precisely what conservatives used to say about socialists.
Well, as I told you, like things have turned around. Like the conservatives were the ones that would have been arguing against alcohol in convenience stores 30 years ago. Now they're the ones that are arguing for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we have kind of so this story about Berliner is not just about another news person getting fired or disciplined for putting his viewpoint out there, but it's actually quite central to, I think, where politics seems to be right now.
Yeah, the polarization thing is happening, and I have a feeling that unfortunately, whether you're from the right or the left, the problem is we know better than you. We know better than you. So we're going to tell you what we think you should hear, and we're going to eliminate what else you should have. Like I said, when you have somebody from NPR talking to somebody from Ontario after Doug Ford gets elected and starts comparing him to Donald Trump right away, and what kind of and then goes on to insult him many times, and then does not have an alternate opinion. That was one person's opinion. So that you present her as an expert and leave it at that. I got big problems with that kind of reporting.
You know what? When we first got 24-hour television, 24-hour news, I thought the what we would be getting with it would be, in normal news, it's like, we're going to speak with this particular individual, and they have one particular viewpoint about something. And for example, so on a strike situation, we're going to speak with the bosses. We're not going to speak with the unions because we don't have time to put up two viewpoints, but we'll give you the boss's viewpoint about the strike. I thought, for example, when we got 24-hour news, hey, you've got plenty of time. Now you've got the opportunity to go and speak to the bosses. You've got the opportunity to go and speak to the striking workers. You've got the opportunity to go and speak to the consumer. You've got the opportunity to go and speak to the wives and children of the strikers and find out what's behind the strike. But that never happened. 24-hour news was just continuation of everything that you had beforehand.
I was disappointed with it too. The problem, of course, is who's paying for it. You have to get viewers. If you got 24-hour news, you have to have viewers. I always say if anyone wanted a good alternative to Western news, get into Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera has a lot of very good features, and even though some of them I found very progressive, features, I've seen some. Usually they are sort of interviewing somebody from the far left. Really, that wasn't the opinions of the piece. I would suggest NPR has a show called The Listening Post, which is extremely good. What it does, it pretty much watches what other news agencies do and pick apart their biases, basically, and reveal them. The Counting Post, if you're into economics, that's a very good thing. It gives a very balanced view of the world, and I think that's what's missing right now. That's why we get supercharged. I hate Ford. He's an evil bastard. He's corrupt. And then somebody's saying, I hate JT. He's corrupt. He's an evil bastard. And, go on and on and on. Jagmeet Singh is a Maoist. These kind of things.
And all of that stuff is all bullshit, of course.
Yeah, what you do is you have a if you're even the People's Party of Canada, as much as revolting as I find it, it has a place. So does the Communist Party of Canada have a place. I have faith in the people of Canada to choose correctly, but there's too many of these people out there, no matter what, whether they're from the right or the left, feel that they know better, and they're worried about your ability to make a decision that they want you to make. And so they try to filter the news that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, we should scram, eh?
You were talking about economic news, economic style of stuff. And I used to get Financial Times like once a week. You know, I'd get the Friday edition and I'd analyze it across the weekend. When I lived in Britain, can't get it here.
Well, I suppose you could. You could.
You can get it by
you can
get it online, like
version,
everything else. Yeah, you can get it like everywhere else online. Yeah. All right, and I think we'll have to call it quits there.
Yes. Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace, everyone. We don't want another 45.